Hi, welcome to this video about how to answer discussion board questions successfully. This is actually a larger idea behind why we have a lot of the assignments the way we do. It's going to be mostly geared towards discussion board questions, but any assignment that asks you a direct question or series of questions that asks for a response in less than 500 words, you can actually use this model to answer those questions effectively and hopefully get full points from your instructors. And this is true from high school all the way up through grad school. So one of the questions that I get a lot is, what do we have discussion boards? Why do they have requirements like word count or comments? And the idea here is that what we really want is to somehow foster the kinds of discussions we would have in person in classes in an online format. It's very difficult to have those kinds of conversations without being in person. In fact, if we recorded a conversation between two people of 5 minutes or so, we'd find that there were several hundred words exchanged over that time period. And so what we're trying to do is mimic that in what we call an asynchronous environment. An asynchronous environment is just an environment that someone posts their idea and then someone out of time, out of sequence, comes maybe 12 hours later, maybe 5 minutes later, and responds to that question. And so it's a conversation that happens a lot slower because we are not having the conversation at the exact same time. And so that's why we have the word counts. That's why we have comment counts. That's why we're requiring certain levels of participation from our students. Is we're trying to mimic what we do in classes. Now, is it perfect? Of course not. But it's all we have in an asynchronous environment for our students who are unable to come to classes, or during the pandemic, for example, are unable to be in classes together in person. It's very difficult to have that kind of sequence. And so we move things online to an asynchronous environment largely to facilitate learning without needing to be in the same room or needing to be in the same, even a digital room like a Discord room, which I use in my classrooms. So that's why we have them. That's why they exist. That's why we have word counts and comment counts. So if you're a student, understand that. We're not doing it to be mean. We're not doing it to make life harder for you. We are largely doing it because we would rather have the conversation in person, but we just can't. And if we look online, these kinds of conversations are happening all the time. Reddit, which is a large forum or series of forums, as we have subreddits, that's all it is a discussion forum where somebody will come on, they'll be, the poster, they'll say, here's my idea, and then it'll be a series of comments. The original poster will come back on and then respond to those comments. That's what we want, but in a classroom environment, and it's hard because largely we need students to invest. So let's go through some lingo. We're going to use the word posts for your responses to the prompt that the instructor has for you. And again, we're focusing on discussion boards, but any assignment of less than 500 words, this is true for. It's the same organization that you'll have, even if it's a series of questions. And so we use the word post to talk about your response to the prompt. And so this is very common if you go online to Reddits, which we've talked about, or just other discussion forums. They'll have OP did this, and that's the person who originally posted whatever that started the conversation. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about posts. And so what we want to do now is understand what makes a good post in an academic setting. And writing a good post is largely just this simple organization. So the first step is having an effective topic sentence. And the topic sentence here is just your answer to the prompt in a simple, elegant, single sentence. It shouldn't be 3 sentences. It should be 1. We should know from the first sentence what your plan is, what your discussion is. We should know what you're trying to say. Some of this can come down to helping with titles, too. If you're allowed to have a title in a post, then having an effective title would be great. I would not replace a title with a topic sentence, but I would boil the topic sentence down to its key elements and give that the title, rather than responding with, discussion forum to response. That's not meaningful. It doesn't tell your audience anything. And if you do engage in that, you'll see that you're going to get better comments because people come into your post understanding better what you want. So you really want to start with a good topic sentence. In 1 sentence, what are you trying to say? And again, this goes for any assignment that's just one paragraph, up to 500. I've had people write paragraphs of 750 words. It's not uncommon in that space. If it's long enough that we need it to be 750 words to get through the ideas, but it's still about one thing. You should have one topic sentence. So the next step is to have evidence to support your topic sentence. This should come first. And I often will tell my students that the best way to understand your topic sentence is to start by reading the question and eliciting some response to the question. Most discussion forums will ask you one of two things. They'll ask you about a reading or an activity that you did. It might be a video, but they'll be like, hey, respond to this thing that we all watched as a group. If you're paying attention to the question before it happens, you might be able to start listening for that evidence. You might be able to start thinking about, before you even watch or read, what is it that I'm going to think about or say about this video or this reading? So that'd be a good place to start, is read the question before you even engage the activity. Before you do the reading, before you watch the video, read and understand the question. Then, as you read and watch, listen for things that trigger you. Listen for things that will give you some sort of response to that initial question. We're going to look at a question here in a second so you can kind of see it, but that's the idea, is that we begin with that response. So the question that I'm going to be using as this sort of ridiculous example is, what is the most underrated Disney movie? We all know the greats, Aladdin, Lion King, Tangled, these great movies that make tons of money, that have huge fan followings, that huge merchandising options, rides at the Disneyland parks. But what's the most underrated one? Now, you might have already had a response to that, but you have to then support it with evidence. So what makes it underrated? And that's where we want to go into the actual film, movie, reading, or whatever, and provide evidence. If it's a reading or something like a TED Talk, get direct quotes. Listen for direct things that you can respond to. From there, the question is, how does that evidence support your position? So let's look at my example. I'm arguing that the most underrated Disney movie is The Emperor's New Groove. Why? For lots of reasons. It's one of my favorite movies personally, but it's not very popular. A lot of people don't even know it. It's not on the slate of movies that are being remade by Disney in live action format, the way that Aladdin has and Lion King has and Beauty and the Beast has. They're never going to make that into a live action film. And so that might be evidence for me, is that nobody's paying attention to this film. And so my immediate response to that question was to think about movies that I loved that nobody really pays attention to. It might be something that they really like, but if you talk about Disney movies, it may not be one that comes up in their mind very quickly. And so I'm going to then think about, why is it underrated? Why don't people like this movie? Why isn't it such a big deal? As I said, a lot of people would consider it a good movie. But most people wouldn't put it in their top Disney movies behind movies like Aladdin, Lion King, and Tangled, or Beauty and the Beast, or The Little Mermaid. These movies are the top 10 movies, whereas The Emperor's New Groove is not on that list. Now, I could actually go out and do research and look at like Ranker articles or BuzzFeed articles about the top Disney movies, and that would just provide me with better evidence. More evidence is that it lacks that seriousness, right? It's a joke, and it's kind of a funny movie throughout. The Emperor's turned into a llama, and it's just kind of funny. We also get this really cool relationship between Pacha and his wife, and they're really funny too, because they're just busting him the whole time, and it's great. And so I have some measures of why is it underrated, right? Does the evidence help us see the film as underrated? In our first evidence, the fact that it's not as popular, it's not on these high ranks of movies that people like, that makes it underrated. But is it from the film? Well, not really. If we had a BuzzFeed article, I think that would be fantastic evidence. The second piece of evidence here about the scenes in the movie, those are things that show this movie is a great movie. Now, does that help us see that it's underrated? No. But does it count as evidence that really dictates and shows, yes, what's the difference between these two? The first piece of evidence is largely my opinion. if I went out and found BuzzFeed articles, or if I found Ranker articles about this film that showed, yes, look, we have these pieces of evidence that show it's not even in the top 10 of movies, then that would be great evidence because it's outside of my opinion. It exists somewhere with data points. That doesn't mean it's invalid for my response. These responses are largely personal, and you can say it. It helps us to see, and I might agree or I might disagree, and we'll get to that when we get to comments. And so the discussion should follow each piece of evidence. Every time you give me a piece of evidence, I should have a discussion to look at how that evidence supports my claim. And so if we take this outline and we put it into a discussion forum post, here's something that we could really appreciate. So it's The Emperor's New Groove. It's the most underrated Disney movie because of its lack of popularity, despite it being a really good film. Many people would not consider it their favorite Disney movie, and it's often supplanted by other movies like Lion King, Moana, Big Hero 6. And while these are all quality, they use heavy topics and light humor to make them at times too intense for, a lighthearted adventure. I'm trying to connect these pieces of evidence, right? Why is it not as popular? I'm trying to say it's not as popular because it's just a joke throughout. And then I give the example. Pacha's strong wife and kids offer a number of humorous comedic scenes. In one scene, the villain Yzma is trying to find the Emperor, and his wife and kids lock her in a room, and she says, and I could have directly quoted it, I was trying to save myself some time, but she says, "Tell us what the talking llama is, and we'll burn your house to the ground." And the kids say, well, which is it? Is it and or? Because that's a really important conjunction. So they're critiquing her grammar to show the grammar mistake in its sort of semiotic example, which is hilarious. And another one is when we break the fourth wall and have some sort of reflection, which is great. It's not as complicated as The Lion King, which, if you're not familiar, is actually based on a Shakespearean play. But it's a great comedic movie. It has lessons for kids and parents. It's funny, but it's not that popular. That's all I'm trying to say. And so what makes it a good post? First of all, from the first sentence, you know what movie I think is underrated. You know why I think it's underrated. It's very clear from the first sentence what I'm trying to get at. It provides really detailed evidence. Again, I could have given more detailed evidence if I wanted to make those points, looking for that evidence. But anyone who's seen the film can understand it. Anyone who hasn't is like, okay, well, there's this joke and it's about grammar, but it's funny. If I directly quoted it, I might be in a better position. But that's what the idea is that the evidence supports it. Also important here is the word count. Notice that the word count is between 150 to 250 words. It's not an arbitrary place. It's not meant to be difficult to meet. The reason we have word counts isn't to make people suffer. The reason we have word counts is that we need a depth of analysis. You can't do that depth of analysis in 50 words. So that's why we have these word counts. Mine was 211 words. It's right in between the two. And that's where we want. It provided a good topic sentence. It provided several pieces of evidence to support my position. And it gives jumping off points to comments. People can agree or disagree with it because it's simple. It provides that evidence. And I'm going to show you here when we get to comments how you could agree or disagree with it. So now we get to comments. Comments are how students will respond to each other, how students will respond to people who've responded to them. And we use this comment to that's where the conversation is taking place, is where people are responding to one another. If it's one person talking, it's a speech, it's not a discussion. And so that's why we want these posting limits. We want you to get in and have conversations. We want you to have debate. We want you to further evidence. And so you need to respond to comments on your own post to help foster that discussion. And you need to respond to any other posts that you feel strongly about. And it shouldn't be about meeting minimum requirements. So what is a good comment? And it's very much the same as writing a good post. The first thing you have to do is read the posts and have a response to them. You might have already had a response to my discussion of Emperor's New Groove. I have a couple different responses that I came up with, but you can react to it. And that reaction is, no, that movie's not underrated. Or maybe even it's, no, that movie's not that good. Or maybe it's, that movie is amazing, but it is underrated, and I'm going to continue that conversation. In either case, that's our goal, is to continue the conversation. It's not to end it, it's to continue it. It's not to try and win. It's to try and have a good conversation about this film or other underrated Disney films. So let's say you disagree, and that's what this one on the left. You say, I disagree. It does have its serious moments, but I think one of the serious aspects of the moment is where Kuzco really has to deal with the consequences of his actions. I pointed to this in my original post. I talked about him breaking the fourth wall, but that's a really dark place for children to see, is somebody left alone in the rain, depressed, and then commenting on their depression. So as I said, it's lighthearted and easy and fun the whole time. This comment is like, it's not that lighthearted. It's not. The whole point is it's an assassination plot, which is also great evidence. But this comment is meant to sort of critique my response. And if I were to respond to that, then we have a conversation about, well, yeah, these are dark moments, but they're not as dark as, The Lion King. There is no actual death throughout the whole film. But let's say you agree. You could say, well, I agree with the humor in the film. It is lighthearted adventure. Now your goal is to add more evidence to that lighthearted nature. And so I bring in the idea of Kronk, who may be your favorite character. He is a ridiculous character. He's so funny. And so he's singing his own, while he's about to assassinate the emperor, he's singing his own theme music, and it's hilarious. And it really breaks the tension, because you're like, there's no way this guy is ever going to complete any mission. He's too dumb. And so that's kind of a funny place, and it really breaks down that. But again, the goal here is to further the conversation. It isn't to end, it's to give more evidences to the comment that I was given, or to give counter evidence. That's how we have a discussion. So, what makes them good comments? They do continue discussion. Discussion boards are meant to be a conversation. They're not meant to be huge analytical exercises. It's a short analytical exercise where you're conveying your opinion, and then you're negotiating that opinion with your peers. And that's the idea. And so that's what we want. Both of them provide new evidence for their own assertions. Both of them start with an assertion. The first disagree is, it's not that light. The second disagree is, yeah, it is really funny. I really liked that and enjoyed that aspect. But because they both start with topic sentences that respond to the original post, we know from the first sentence what's going on. And then we can see they provided new evidence, and they talk about how that evidence either further supports the original post or contradicts the original post. And that allows for that conversation. The last is that they're sufficiently long. And again, it isn't about word count. Word counts are really arbitrary. What it's really about is, did you convey an idea? Was the idea meaningful? Did it continue the conversation? Did it provide a place of agreement or disagreement? Did it provide further evidence or contradictory evidence? That's really what we want as instructors. And so be sure that as you continue to post in these discussion forums, that you're utilizing these sort of ideas. Your instructors will hopefully be presenting you with the feedback required so that you can see what you're doing. But the idea is that you respond in the first sentence, either in a comment or in an original post. Your topic sentence, your first sentence, really tells us what you're trying to say. From there, you provide evidence that supports what you're trying to say, and you discuss how the evidence does it. And it's same for the original post, it's same for the comments, it's same for any single paragraph response that you're going to give in high school or college. And the best advice I can give to people is know your evidence, because that's how we know you're doing the work. So if you don't provide us with sufficient evidence, if you don't provide us with direct quotes from the reading, direct quotes from the video, very specific things, then we're going to have a hard time believing that you did the work, that you understood the evidence, and that your post is good work. So that's the real key. Then communicating that evidence effectively with some sort of perspective. That's all we need from these posts. So if you have any questions, please direct them to your instructors. Otherwise, I hope this video will help you. Have a great day.